I was 13 years old the day my uncle sold me to a monster. 13 years old when I learned that family could become your executioner, that a girl's body could be bartered for silver coins heavy enough to buy a man's silence about what he'd done. I remember the sound, the wet clink of metal in the rain as it passed from Lord Reynard de Lysel's gloved hand to my uncle's trembling palm. And I remember thinking with the cold, razor-sharp clarity that comes not from devastation, but from vindication, this was the sound of my plan working. My name is Emmeline de Montrose, though for 3 years I've answered to Emmy de Blunt. And this is the story of how I went from hidden heir to sold servant to the architect of my enemy's destruction. From the girl they thought they'd broken to the reckoning they never saw coming. But let me take you back to the beginning. Not to the day I was sold, that was the ending of one chapter and the opening of another. Let me take you back to the real beginning. To the day I stopped being a child. To my 10th birthday. Hi friends, if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, please click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you another story as interesting as this one so you don't miss it. Alrighty, now let's keep going. Chapter 1. The day the world showed its teeth. The world ended for me on a Thursday. I know that's a strange thing to remember, what day of the week it was. But when you're 10 years old and you're watching your father bleed out on the stone floor of his own hall while you hide behind a tapestry, your mind latches onto the smallest, most meaningless details. Thursday. It was just past sunset. The kind of golden autumn evening that makes everything look softer, kinder than it really is. There had been laughter that morning. Songs. My father had swung me up onto his shoulders at breakfast and declared that his little flame-haired warrior was now 10 winters old and ready to learn the sword. I'd been so excited I could barely eat. After Mama died when I was small, Father had become my entire world. And the thought that he saw me as someone strong enough, worthy enough to train like the boys, it made me feel invincible. I'd stopped expecting happiness years ago, if I'm honest. The castle had been cold since Mama's death. But somehow, that morning, I had hoped. Had thought maybe we could be whole again. Just him and me against the world. I was in the solar, playing with the wooden sword Father had given me that morning, when I heard the commotion in the great hall below. Men's voices. Shouting. Then the sound that I would hear in my nightmares for 3 years, steel sliding from scabbards. I remember creeping to the door. The hallway was empty, but I could hear everything. My father's voice, confused, then angry. Walter? What is this? Why are you armed in my house? And then my uncle's voice. My mother's brother, the man who'd bounced me on his knee as a baby. I'm sorry, Henri, but you have something we need. Your lands, your influence with the king. And you're too honorable to see reason. I should have run for help. Should have screamed. But I was frozen at the top of the stairs, watching through the carved stone balustrade as 5 men surrounded my father. I recognized them all. Lord Reynard de Lysel, tall and cruel-faced. Sir Marcus, who'd taught me to play chess. Geoffrey the merchant, who brought me candies from the city. And my Uncle Walter, the man who'd wept at my mother's funeral. They didn't give Father a chance to fight. They fell on him like wolves on a deer. I must have made a sound, a whimper, a gasp, because Uncle Walter's head snapped up. Our eyes met across that blood-soaked hall. For a moment, I saw something in his face. Regret. Horror at what he was doing. But then Lord Reynard spoke. The child. She's seen us. I ran. Flew down the servants' passages Father had shown me in our games of hide and seek. Behind me, I heard shouting. Boots on stone. I found the hidden door he'd revealed to me once, the one that led to the old escape tunnel built during the border wars. As I pulled it shut behind me, I heard Lord Reynard's voice echoing through the corridor. Find her. Search every room. If Henri has an heir, we'll never be safe. I ran through that tunnel, my new wooden sword clutched in my hand, my birthday dress torn and muddy. I ran until I collapsed in the woods, sobbing and retching and shaking. And that's where the merchant's family found me at dawn, a filthy, incoherent child who'd clearly run away from somewhere. I told them my name was Emmy. Just Emmy. That I was an orphan. That I had nowhere to go. They took me to my Uncle Walter. He'd already spread the story by then, you see. Lord Montrose had been murdered by bandits. Such a tragedy. His daughter had perished in the attack. They'd found a small body, burned beyond recognition. Uncle Walter, the grieving brother-in-law, had claimed the estates as next of kin. False documents had been prepared showing I was his daughter by a peasant woman, not his niece and rightful heir. When the merchants brought me to his door, I saw the calculation in his eyes. He could kill me quietly, or he could keep me close, control me, use me. After all, who would believe a traumatized 10-year-old over a respected nobleman? He chose control, and I let him think it was working. For 3 years, I lived in my uncle's house. I wore rags and scrubbed floors. I learned to make myself small, invisible, beneath notice. I endured his rage when he drank, his cruelty when he remembered who I really was, his violence when I reminded him too much of my mother. And I planned. I learned everything I could. I listened at doors. I read documents I shouldn't have been able to read, then carefully put them back exactly as I found them. I discovered that Lord Reynard collected secrets the way some men collect swords. That he was the spider at the center of the conspiracy web. That he kept evidence of everyone's crimes at his manor, insurance, leverage, power. If I could get inside Lysel Manor, I could destroy them all. But how does a powerless child gain access to a lord's fortress? The answer came to me slowly, horribly. Lord Reynard had certain tastes. Preferences that were whispered about in the servants' quarters. Young servants who entered his household sometimes disappeared into roles that were never quite explained. And he bought his servants from very specific sources. Men like my uncle, who had access to children no one would miss. So I became someone no one would miss. I provoked my uncle's rages. Made myself more trouble than I was worth. Planted the idea in his drink-addled brain that he could profit from selling me. Researched what Lord Reynard wanted in his purchases and made myself fit that description. On my 13th birthday, my uncle beat me badly enough that I knew he'd crossed a line even he couldn't fully live with. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that he would sell me soon. I was right. 3 weeks later, he took me to the village square in the rain. I wore my most ragged dress, kept my eyes down, my shoulders hunched. I played the broken child perfectly. And when Lord Reynard's cold eyes assessed me and found me acceptable, when the silver changed hands, when his gloved hand gripped my shoulder and I was led toward the cart, I let myself smile. Just for a heartbeat. Just for me. Because after 3 years of planning, I was finally exactly where I needed to be. The world ended for me when I was 10. But I was about to end the world for them. And unlike my father, they would never see me coming. Chapter 2. The House of Wolves. The cart jolted over every rut and stone in the road, but I barely felt it. My wrists were bound with rough rope that bit into my skin, and I sat wedged between 2 other purchases, a boy of maybe 15 with dead eyes, and a woman who wept silently into her hands. Lord Reynard rode ahead on his black destrier, never looking back at his cargo. Why would he? We were nothing. Less than nothing. The journey took 6 hours through countryside that grew progressively darker and more isolated. Forests pressed close to the road, their shadows deep and hungry. No villages. No travelers. Just the steady clop of hooves and the creak of wooden wheels and the woman's muffled sobs. I kept my head down and my eyes busy. 2 guards accompanied the cart. They changed positions every hour, rotating from left flank to right. The one with the scar favored his right leg, an old injury. The younger one was nervous, constantly scanning the tree line. These details mattered. Everything mattered now. When Lysel Manor finally came into view as we crested a hill, my breath caught despite my preparation. It wasn't a manor. It was a fortress. Stone walls 20 feet high, crowned with battlements where guards paced in endless circuits. for towers jutted toward the gray sky like accusing fingers. The main gate was iron-reinforced oak thick enough to withstand a siege. This wasn't a home. It was a prison designed to keep people in as much as out. The gates groaned open and swallowed us whole. Inside the courtyard, we were unloaded like sacks of grain. The boy stumbled and fell. One of the guards kicked him casually, not even in anger, just habit. The woman was dragged toward the kitchens, still weeping. And I was shoved toward a squat stone building that smelled of unwashed bodies and despair. The servants' quarters. The door opened onto a long, low room lit by narrow slits high in the walls. Straw pallets lined the floor in tight rows, barely an arm's length between them. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, smoke, and human waste from the overflowing chamber pots in the corner. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some curious, most dead, all warning me not to expect kindness here. Well, fresh meat. The voice came from a woman who stepped out of the shadows like something that had been waiting to pounce. She was perhaps 40, with a face carved from granite and eyes that had long ago stopped seeing people as people. Her dress was slightly better quality than the others, a marker of status in this hell. The ring of keys at her belt clinked as she circled me slowly, appraising. I'm Marjorie, head of house. You answer to me. You breathe when I say breathe. You piss when I give permission. Understand? I kept my eyes down. Yes, mistress. Yes, mistress, she mimicked in a cruel sing-song. Pretty manners for a souled girl. Let's see if you keep them. The blow came without warning, a backhanded strike that snapped my head sideways and split my lip. I tasted blood and copper and rage, but I let myself crumple, let out a small whimper of fear. Inside, I was counting. 13 steps from door to where Marjorie stood. 8 servants within immediate reach. 2 exit points, the main door and a smaller door in the back corner, probably leading to the kitchens. That's for existing, Marjorie said conversationally. Tomorrow you'll learn what real work earns you. Now find a pallet and stay out of my sight. She swept out, keys jangling. The moment she was gone, the other servants returned to their business, mending, talking in low whispers, staring at nothing. No one looked at me. No one offered comfort. I'd become invisible already, which was exactly what I needed. I found an empty pallet in the darkest corner, near a crack in the stone wall where cold air whistled through. Good. The cold would keep me alert. As I sank onto the filthy straw, my hand moved to the hidden pocket I'd sewn into my shift's inner seam. My fingers found the small, hard shape wrapped in cloth. My father's signet ring. The seal of House Montrose, a phoenix rising from flames. I'd carried it pressed against my skin for 3 years, through every humiliation, every beating, every moment I'd wanted to give up. I'd held it the night I'd found my father's body in that blood-soaked hall, had pressed it to my lips as I whispered my vow over him. I will make them pay. Every single one. I swear it on my blood, on your blood, on everything we were. I will destroy them, Father. I promise. I'd been 10 years old, alone, terrified. But I'd meant every word. Now I carefully unwrapped the ring and slipped it into the crack in the wall behind my pallet, wedging it deep where no casual search would find it. I couldn't risk carrying it, but I needed it close. Needed to remember who I really was beneath this mask of submission. Lady Emmeline de Montrose. Last of her line. And the instrument of justice 3 years in the making. I allowed myself one moment, just one, to press my forehead against the cold stone and let tears slip down my cheeks. For my father. For the girl I used to be. For everything I'd sacrificed to get here. Then I wiped my face clean, schooled my features into terrified submission, and lay back on the straw. Around me, the other servants settled in for the night. Someone was crying quietly. Someone else was snoring. The wind whistled through the crack where my birthright was hidden. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tonight, I let myself remember that I was exactly where I'd planned to be. And they had no idea what they'd brought into their house. Chapter 3. The Mask She Wears. I learned the rhythm of invisibility within 3 days. Wake before dawn to the clanging of Marjorie's bell. Scrub the great hall floors on hands and knees until the stones gleamed and my fingers bled. Empty chamber pots that reeked of last night's excesses. Haul water from the well until my shoulders screamed. Serve meals with eyes downcast, anticipating needs before they were spoken. Take the casual blows, the crude comments, the deliberate cruelty with nothing but a flinch and a murmured apology. I became exactly what they expected, a cowed, broken thing grateful for scraps. The perfect servant. The kind that fades into the tapestries in stone, present but unseen. I learned to read Marjorie's moods in the set of her jaw, to predict when the cook would lash out with her wooden spoon, to know which guards would grope and which would simply ignore me. I made myself useful enough to keep, invisible enough to be forgotten. And all the while I watched. I learned. Lord Reynard took his morning meal alone in his solar at dawn. He inspected the guard rotations every third day at midday. He met with his steward on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He kept his private study locked, but the key hung on a ring at his belt that sometimes, just sometimes, he left on his bedside table when he bathed. Every detail, every pattern, every vulnerability catalogued and stored. The first time I came face to face with him, I was carrying linens through the corridor outside his chambers. He emerged suddenly, nearly colliding with me. I dropped into a curtsy so deep my forehead almost touched the floor, letting the pile of sheets obscure my face. "Clumsy," he muttered, then paused. "Look at me, girl." My heart was thunder, but I raised my eyes slowly, keeping them wide, frightened, submissive. I'd spent 3 years changing myself. My posture was hunched now where it had been straight. I kept my hair deliberately tangled and unwashed, darkening the red to something duller. I'd learned to make my face slack, my expression vacant. The sharp-eyed girl who'd been Lady Emmeline was buried deep beneath layers of practiced stupidity. He studied me with the clinical interest of a man appraising livestock. New purchase. From Walter de Blunt. Not a question. His eyes lingered on my frame in a way that made my skin crawl. Still too young and too thin for my tastes. But in a year or two, perhaps. He smiled, a predator's expression. "We'll find other uses for you then." "Yes, my lord," I whispered, voice trembling exactly the right amount. Inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was imagining my hands around his throat. He dismissed me with a wave and moved on. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? 3 years ago, I'd been a well-fed lord's daughter in fine dresses with confident eyes. Now I was a starving servant in rags who couldn't meet anyone's gaze. He saw what he expected to see, nothing. That afternoon, I was polishing silver in the alcove outside his study when voices drifted through the not-quite-closed door. I froze, barely breathing, every sense straining. Still asking questions about Montrose. Uncle Walter's voice, nervous and slurred with wine. "Some of the northern lords remember Henri had a daughter. The girl is dead." Lord Reynard's voice was cold, final. "We made certain. The body in the fire was sufficient. No one will question it now. The Montrose situation is finally, completely settled. But what if someone? Walter, you pathetic drunk, no one suspects anything. Henri de Montrose was murdered by bandits. His daughter perished in the attack. You inherited his estates as legal next of kin. The documents are flawless. And even if they weren't, who would champion a dead girl's claim? The king himself signed the transfer orders. It's over. You're rich. Stop whining and enjoy it." Silence. Then my uncle's voice, quieter. "Sometimes I dream about her. About Henri. About that night. Then drink more and dream less. We did what was necessary. Now collect yourself. We have business to discuss regarding the shipments." I moved away silently, my hands shaking as I gathered the silver. They thought they'd won. Thought they were safe. The satisfaction that burned through me was almost painful in its intensity. They had no idea. I was still cataloging guard positions that evening when someone spoke directly behind me. "You're very observant for a servant." I spun, heart lurching. A young man stood in the corridor, perhaps 15, with Lord Reynard's dark hair but softer features, and eyes that held intelligence rather than cruelty. He wore plain clothes, not quite servant's garb, but far from lordly. His hands were calloused from work. I dropped my eyes immediately, relaxed into my submissive posture. I don't know what you mean, my lord. I'm no lord. I'm Adrian, the bastard son. His voice held bitter amusement. And I saw you. Just now. You were counting. The guards, their positions, memorizing their patterns. That's not something a simple serving girl does. My mind raced. Deny? Attack? Run? But his voice held curiosity, not accusation. I risked a glance up. His eyes were watching me with the same intensity I'd been watching everyone else, the look of someone who'd learned to survive by paying attention. I was just. Lying won't work with me, he said quietly. I'm the invisible one in this household too. I see things. And you're not what you're pretending to be. He paused. Don't worry. I won't tell anyone. In this house, we all have masks we wear to survive. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me trembling in the shadows. I thought of being 11, living in Uncle Walter's house as his supposed daughter. How I'd listened at doors, pieced together whispered conversations, understood slowly that he'd been part of my father's murder. How I'd begun researching Lord Reynard, learning his household, planning my infiltration. How I'd taught myself to become what they would buy. 3 years of preparation. 3 years of building this mask. And someone had just seen through it. I returned to the servants' quarters that night wondering if Adrian de Lysol was a complication I'd have to eliminate, or if perhaps, just perhaps, he might be useful. Either way, I couldn't let him threaten what I'd come here to do. Chapter 4. Poison and Information. Opportunity came disguised as incompetence. One of the older servants who cleaned Lord Reynard's study took ill with fever, and Marjorie needed a replacement. I made sure I was nearby, eyes downcast, when she was deciding. You, she snapped at me. Can you dust without breaking things? Yes, mistress. I kept my voice small, grateful. His lordship's study needs daily cleaning. Touch nothing but dust and dirt. If I hear you've moved so much as a single paper, I'll have the skin off your back. Understand? Yes, mistress. I can't read anyway. The lie slipped out easily, seasoned with just enough shame. Marjorie's contempt was exactly what I needed. An illiterate servant was harmless. Invisible. Lord Reynard's study was a treasure trove. Documents lay scattered across his desk, correspondence, ledgers, deeds. I began slowly, carefully. Dust first, genuinely clean, establish the pattern of a thorough, unremarkable servant. Then, when I was certain of the routine, I started reading. Land transfers from the Montrose estates to various conspirators. Letters arranging my father's accident. A contract with a mercenary captain, dated 3 years ago, payment for unspecified services. Every piece of evidence I'd dreamed of finding, just sitting there in his arrogant confidence that no one would dare look. I couldn't take them, he'd notice. But I could copy them. Late at night in the servants' quarters, by the stub of a stolen candle, I transcribed everything onto scraps of parchment begged from the kitchen for kindling. My hand cramped. My eyes burned. But page by page, I built my case. During my cleaning, I also began my secondary campaign. Lord Reynard kept his prized hunting hounds in kennels visible from his study window. He doted on them with more affection than he'd ever shown a human. Perfect. I'd learned about plants from my father's physician, which healed, which harmed, which killed slowly enough to seem like natural illness. Monkshood root, carefully prepared, mixed into rendered fat and rolled into tiny balls. I'd been collecting the ingredients for weeks, stealing moments in the kitchen garden, drying leaves in hidden corners. The dogs ate treats from anyone. Within a week, the largest hound began refusing food. Within 2, he was dead. Lord Reynard raged through the household, but found no cause, no culprit. Just misfortune. We'll need new dogs, I heard him tell his steward. Send to that breeder in Ashford. He has the best stock. I nearly smiled. The breeder in Ashford was no breeder at all, but Thomas Blackwood, who'd served my father as master of horse. He was one of the few who'd escaped that night, one of the few who'd been searching for me. I'd gotten word to him months ago through careful planning. Every dog Lord Reynard bought would come with messages hidden in their collars. My outside contact. My lifeline. But Adrian was becoming a problem. He watched me constantly now, not with cruelty, but with an unnerving perception. When one of the guards cornered me in the storage room one evening, hands reaching, breath reeking of ale, it was Adrian who appeared in the doorway. She's wanted in the kitchens. Now. The guard hesitated, then backed off grumbling. Adrian waited until he was gone, then turned to me. His eyes were too knowing. You're not afraid enough. When he grabbed you, you were calculating. Looking for weapons, exits, weak points. That's not how a normal serving girl reacts. My heart hammered, but I kept my mask. I don't know what. Stop. His voice was gentle, almost pleading. I've been watching you for weeks. You're playing a role. A very good role. But it is a role. He stepped closer. Who are you really? Why are you here? For a moment, just a moment, I wanted to tell him. Wanted to trust someone, to not be utterly alone in this nightmare. But trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. I'm nobody, I whispered. Just trying to survive. Like you. Liar. But he said it without anger. Fine. Keep your secrets. Just be careful. My father is more dangerous than you think. He walked away, and I stood there shaking. Not from fear. From the terrifying realization that someone saw me. Really saw me. 2 days later, the peddler came, an old man with a cart of cheap goods and expensive information. I bought a hair ribbon while the cook haggled. My fingers brushed his wrist in the exchange, felt the pattern he tapped. Message received. Loyalists ready. What do you need? I tapped back. Time, evidence gathering, will signal. He left. No one noticed our silent conversation. No one except Adrian, who watched from across the courtyard with those two knowing eyes. I thought of being 12, living in Uncle Walter's house. How I'd learned to read his patterns, the drinking, the rage, the moments when his guilt made him vulnerable. How one night I'd deliberately broken his favorite cup, then talked back when he'd shouted. How I'd pushed him until his hand had risen, had left bruises even he couldn't ignore the next morning. How I'd listened to him mutter drunkenly that I was too much trouble, more trouble than she's worth, should just sell her and be done with it. How I'd planted the seed. Watered it with more defiance, more difficulty. How I'd researched Lord Reynard's preferences, young, broken but not too broken, pretty but not too pretty, desperate enough to be controllable. How I'd starved myself, dirted myself, practiced being exactly what he would buy. The calculation of it had been chilling even to me. Using my uncle's violence, manipulating my own sale like a chess piece positioning itself on the board. But it had worked. And now I was here, gathering the evidence that would destroy them all. Even if Adrian de Lisle had somehow seen through my carefully constructed mask. Even if that terrified me more than anything else. Chapter 5. The Bastard's Secret. I was reading the notice posted in the kitchen passageway when Adrian's voice cut through the silence. Grain deliveries delayed until Friday. Interesting reading for someone who can't read. I spun, pulse spiking. The corridor was empty except for us, lit only by a single guttering candle. It was past midnight. I'd been returning from Lord Reynard's study with my latest copy documents hidden in my shift. I was just looking at the... Stop. Adrian stepped closer, and I saw exhaustion etched into his young face. I caught you reading. Actually reading, not pretending. Your eyes moved too quickly, too intelligently. You understood every word before you realized I was watching. He leaned against the wall. I'm not going to expose you. I just want the truth. Some of it, at least. My mind raced through options: deny, flee, silence him permanently. But something in his voice stopped me. Not threat. Desperation. Why? I kept my voice neutral. Because I'm so tired of being alone. The words came out raw. Do you know what it's like? Being the bastard son of a monster? Everyone here either fears him or serves him. I'm just furniture. Useful labor he doesn't have to pay. He beats me when I speak out of turn, denied me any education because an ignorant bastard is easier to control. His laugh was bitter. I thought I was the only one who saw what he really is. But you're watching him. Planning something. And I want to help. This wasn't in my plan. Allies meant complications, meant vulnerability, meant someone who could betray me. But looking at Adrian's desperate eyes, I saw something I recognized, someone trapped in a nightmare, surviving on spite and hope. If I teach you to read properly, I said carefully, you help me gather information. About your father's business, his meetings, things I can't access. Yes. No hesitation. Whatever you're planning, whatever you need. I just want him to pay for what he is. The alliance formed in that shadowed corridor felt dangerous and necessary in equal measure. Over the following weeks, we met in stolen moments, late nights in the storage room, early mornings in the stables. I taught him letters, words, how to decode the documents he could now access as his father's servant. He taught me the household's deeper secrets, his father's vulnerabilities, the cracks in the fortress's armor. I told myself he was just a tool, a useful piece on my board. I ignored how his gratitude felt like trust, how his growing competence filled me with something uncomfortably close to pride. I couldn't afford connection, couldn't afford to see him as anything but an asset. When the last of Lord Reynard's hounds died, I carefully suggested through Marjorie that the breeder in Ashford had exceptional stock. I heard the stable master mention him once, mistress. Perhaps his lordship. Lord Reynard ordered 6 new hounds. They arrived a week later, and hidden in each collar was a message from Thomas Blackwood. Ready when you are. Loyalists gathering. Signal when you need us. But that same week, my careful planning nearly shattered. I was copying documents in Lord Reynard's study. He was supposed to be with his steward for another hour. The door opened. He stepped inside. I had perhaps 3 seconds before he'd see me with his private correspondence spread across his desk. Adrian's voice rang from the hallway. Father, I need to speak with you about. Not now, boy. It's about the grain shipments. They're threatening to. By the time Lord Reynard turned back to his study, I was innocently dusting shelves, documents hidden in my apron, face blank and stupid. His eyes narrowed. Then found Adrian in the doorway. Did you send this girl to clean? Yes, Adrian said evenly. The study was filthy. I thought you'd want. The blow sent Adrian sprawling. Then another. And another. Lord Reynard beat his son with methodical brutality while I stood frozen, playing my terrified servant role while every instinct screamed to intervene. Adrian never cried out. Never looked at me. Just took the beating that should have been mine. When Lord Reynard finally tired and dismissed us both, I helped Adrian to the stables, hands shaking. Why? I whispered. Because whatever you're doing, he said through split lips, it's worth protecting. And I realized with cold horror that I'd stopped seeing him as just a tool. I cared. And caring was the most dangerous thing I could do. Chapter 6. The Web Titans. For months into my servitude, the peddler brought news that changed everything. His fingers tapped against mine as I examined a spool of thread. King's Justice, 2 months, Northern Circuit. 2 months. My window was closing. I had evidence, copy documents detailing land theft, murder contracts, conspiracy. I had outside contacts ready to act. What I didn't have was a plan for public exposure dramatic enough that no amount of influence could suppress it. Lord Reynard and his conspirators needed to be caught so thoroughly, so publicly, that even the king couldn't ignore it. But I also had a complication I hadn't planned for. Adrian. Our alliance had deepened into something more dangerous, something that felt almost like friendship. He taught me sword basics in the abandoned North Tower, assuming I was a peasant girl planning escape. Keep your weight centered. Don't telegraph your strikes. His patience was infinite, his encouragement genuine. I taught him history, politics, the intricate dance of noble houses. I revealed too much of my education, too much of who I'd been. He never questioned how a serving girl knew the genealogies of every major house or could discuss military strategy. He just absorbed it all with hungry intelligence. "You'd have made a good lady," he said once, after I'd explained a complex treaty negotiation. "I'm nobody," I replied, but the lie felt heavier each time. Then Lord Reynard made his announcement at dinner, casual as discussing weather. "The red-haired serving girl. She turns 14 in 3 weeks, yes? Marjorie, prepare her. She'll be presented to me that night." The table continued eating. No one reacted. This was normal. Expected. I felt Adrian's eyes on me across the hall, saw his hands clench into fists. But I kept my face blank, terrified, appropriately horrified. Inside, I was calculating frantically. 3 weeks. Not 2 months. 3 weeks. I made my decision that night. I would engineer a feast for my supposed birthday. Lord Reynard would enjoy the theater of it, celebrating before claiming his prize. I'd manipulate him into inviting the local lords, including the conspirators. I'd arrange for the King's Justice to be traveling through at exactly the right moment. And I'd expose them all with evidence so overwhelming they couldn't deny it. It was desperate, rushed, dangerous. It was also my only chance. But 2 weeks before the feast, Adrian found my hiding place. I discovered him in the storage room, sitting frozen with copied documents spread across his lap. His face was white. "Emmy." His voice shook. "What is this?" "Evidence of treason, murder, conspiracy. This is enough to execute a dozen lords." "Where did you get this? What are you planning?" I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. My entire plan was balanced on a knife's edge, and he was holding the blade. "I can explain. The truth." His eyes met mine, no longer curious, but demanding. "Tell me the truth. All of it. Who are you?" The words came slowly, each one feeling like giving away a piece of armor I couldn't afford to lose. I told him about my father's murder. About my real identity, Lady Emmeline de Montrose. About 3 years of planning, of positioning myself exactly here for exactly this purpose. I didn't tell him everything. Didn't tell him how I'd manipulated my own sale, how I'd been using him from the start. Some truths were too dark to speak. But I remembered them. Remembered being 12, living in Uncle Walter's house. How I'd finally decided the time was right, that I'd learned enough, prepared enough. How I'd waited until he was drunk and mean, then deliberately provoked him. How his rage had turned to something worse, how he'd cornered me in my room with intentions that made my skin crawl. I'd hidden a kitchen knife under my pillow for months, waiting. When he'd lunged, I'd struck, catching his face, opening a gash from eyebrow to jaw that would scar permanently. In his shock and pain, I'd pressed my advantage. "You're a monster," I'd hissed. "Everyone will know what you tried to do. Unless you get rid of me. Sell me. I'm more trouble than I'm worth anyway, aren't I? There's a lord who buys girls like me. Lord Reynard de Lysel. I've heard you mention him. He'd pay well." I'd planted the seed in his guilty, drunken mind. Watered it over the following weeks with more defiance, more difficulty. I'd researched what Lord Reynard wanted and made myself into exactly that product. I'd weaponized my uncle's attempted assault, used it to position myself precisely where I needed to be. The calculation had been monstrous. But monsters had made me. Adrian stared at me now, documents in hand, and I saw him trying to reconcile the broken serving girl he'd befriended with the calculating avenger I'd revealed. "I need your help," I said quietly. "In 3 weeks, at the feast, I'm going to destroy them all. But I can't do it alone. You've been lying to me this whole time." "Yes." "Using me." I wanted to lie. Instead, yes. He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Good. Use me. Whatever it takes. Just promise me he pays for everything." Relief and guilt crashed through me in equal measure. "I promise," I said. And meant it. Chapter 7. the truth revealed. Adrian demanded the full story, so I gave him most of it. We sat in the storage room surrounded by damning evidence, and I told him about watching my father die. About Lord Reynard's blade finding my father's heart while Uncle Walter held him down. About 3 years of planning, of making myself into exactly what they'd buy so I could infiltrate this fortress and gather proof. Lady Emmeline de Montrose, he said slowly, testing the name. Your nobility. And I've been teaching you sword basics like you're some peasant girl. I needed to learn. My father never got the chance to teach me. Have you been lying to me this whole time? His voice cracked. Was any of it real? Our friendship, the lessons, everything. I should have said yes immediately, should have reassured him. Instead, I deflected. Does it matter? In 3 weeks, your father and everyone who helped him will face justice. That's what's real. Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, maybe disappointment. But he nodded. Fine. I'll help. But I want out. After you expose him, I'm leaving this place. Plan my escape too. Done. We worked with desperate efficiency. I manipulated Lord Reynard through carefully planted suggestions. Wouldn't a feast demonstrate his power, his generosity? Celebrating his new acquisition with the local lords? He took to the idea eagerly, his vanity making him predictable. I forged letters on his stolen seal, inviting the conspirators. Uncle Walter, Sir Marcus, Geoffrey the merchant. All the men who'd murdered my father, thinking themselves untouchable. And one letter to the King's Justice, suggesting his presence would honor the occasion. Adrian helped coordinate servants, arrange seating, ensure every detail was perfect. We were playing the most dangerous game, and one mistake would cost us everything. But Marjorie was watching. That girl, I heard her tell Lord Reynard. She's got ideas above her station. Too clever by half. Then perhaps I'll break her of that cleverness soon, he replied, and his eyes followed me with increasing hunger. Every day the tension wound tighter. Lord Reynard's attention intensified, his casual touches lingering too long. Marjorie assigned me humiliating tasks, testing my submission. Adrian and I communicated in glances and brief whispers, two conspirators walking a razor's edge. The night before the feast, I was checking the Great Hall preparations when Adrian found me in the empty room. Moonlight streamed through high windows, painting everything silver. Tomorrow everything changes, he said quietly. Tomorrow we win. Lady Emmeline, I need to know. Was I just a tool to you? Something useful to manipulate? I should have lied. Should have told him what he wanted to hear. Instead, the exhaustion of 3 years of deception crashed over me, and I couldn't find the energy for another lie. I don't know anymore, I whispered. Maybe at first. But now. He kissed me. Sudden, gentle, terrifying in its genuineness. For one heartbeat, I let myself kiss him back. Let myself be just Emmy, 14 and scared and tired of carrying vengeance like a stone in my chest. Let myself feel something other than cold calculation. Then reality returned. I pulled away, rebuilt my walls. After tomorrow, we'll both be free, I said, voice steady again. You'll leave here. I'll reclaim my birthright. This, whatever this is, it can't be. Because you don't feel anything? His voice was raw. Or because you don't let yourself? I didn't answer. Couldn't answer honestly. Get some rest, I said instead. Tomorrow we destroy them all. He left without another word. I stood alone in the moonlit hall, touching my lips where his had been, feeling something crack in the armor I'd spent 3 years building. Tomorrow would bring justice. Victory. Everything I'd sacrificed for. So why did it suddenly feel like I was losing something precious I hadn't known I had? Chapter 8. The Feast of Judgment. The great hall blazed with torchlight and ambition. Lords and ladies arrived in silk and fur, their laughter echoing off stone walls. Uncle Walter came looking prosperous and nervous. Sir Marcus, Geoffrey the merchant, all the conspirators gathered like lambs to slaughter. Then the King's Justice arrived, imposing in formal robes. I hope I'm not intruding. I was traveling nearby and saw your celebration. Lord Reynard's smile was magnanimous. "Your presence honors us, Justice Pemberton." I served wine with downcast eyes, invisible among servants. Adrian stood near the exit dressed as a squire, evidence documents hidden in his doublet. Our eyes met once, a question, an answer, a promise. The feast progressed through courses. Lord Reynard held court, boasting of his influence. Uncle Walter drank heavily. They were comfortable, certain of their power. I waited for the perfect moment. Lord Reynard raised his cup for a toast. I approached with a wine pitcher, demure and submissive. "To prosperity." I stumbled. Wine cascaded down his fine doublet in crimson flood. "Clumsy wretch." He rose, sputtering. In the chaos, Adrian moved. Slipped through the crowd. Placed documents in Justice Pemberton's hands. The justice's face darkened as he read. The hall gradually quieted. "Lord Reynard." His voice cut through noise. "These documents detail conspiracy, murder, and theft of noble estates. Specifically, the murder of Lord Henri de Montrose." Silence crashed down. Lord Reynard's face drained. "I don't know what lies. Witness statements. Contracts with mercenaries. Forged documents. All bearing your seal." Lord Reynard's eyes swept the room, searching. They landed on me. For the first time, he truly looked, saw past dirt and rags to bone structure. Eyes, flame-red hair. Recognition flashed. You're Henri de Montrose's daughter. But you're dead. You found the wrong body." I stood straight, dropped my practiced hunch, let my voice ring clear. "My father sent me to safety before you butchered him. And I've spent every day since preparing for this moment." The hall erupted. Lord Reynard lunged. Adrian intercepted, crashing into his father. They went down in fury, bastard son finally striking back. "Seize them," Justice Pemberton commanded. Guards grabbed Uncle Walter as he tried to flee. Sir Marcus reached for his sword but was overwhelmed. Uncle Walter's face twisted with desperation. "Wait. I protected the girl. Took her in when she had nothing. This is madness." "Protected me?" My voice cut through chaos. "You murdered my father alongside these men. Stole my inheritance. And when I wouldn't break, when I reminded you too much of the sister you betrayed, you tried to break me yourself. I let the words hang. Then you sold me to him." I pointed at Lord Reynard being hauled up in chains. "You gave me to a monster. But you should have killed me when you had the chance, Uncle." Understanding and rage flooded Walter's face. His hand moved with desperate speed, a hidden blade flashing in torchlight as he lunged. I saw death coming and couldn't move fast enough. Adrian threw himself between us. The blade meant for my heart found his shoulder instead. He gasped, staggered, blood blooming across his doublet. "No!" The word tore from my throat. Guards swarmed Walter, dragging him down. The blade clattered across stone. He thrashed like a trapped animal, screaming denials, but chains closed around his wrists. I caught Adrian as he fell, pressed my hands against the wound. His blood was hot, too much, everywhere. "You weren't supposed to, why did you?" "Couldn't let him." Adrian's voice was weak, but his eyes were clear. "Had to protect you. Like you protected me." Justice Pemberton stood over the chaos, face grim. "The evidence is overwhelming. All conspirators will be transported to the capital for trial and execution." The hall buzzed with shock. Lords and ladies stared. Some at the arrested conspirators. Most at me, the servant girl who'd just claimed a murdered lord's name. I held Adrian while guards called for physicians, while the conspirators were dragged away in chains, while my 3 years of planning reached its terrible, victorious conclusion. Uncle Walter's eyes met mine one last time before they hauled him through the doors. I saw hatred there. And fear. Good. Let him be afraid. Let them all be afraid. Lady Emmeline de Montrose had returned. And she'd brought their reckoning with her. Chapter 9. The Cost of Vengeance. The conspirators sat in chains awaiting execution. Lord Reynard. Uncle Walter. Sir Marcus. Jeffrey, 2 others who'd helped hold my father down while he died. Justice had been swift, the evidence overwhelming. They would hang within the week. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I sat beside Adrian's bed in the manor's guest chamber, watching him breathe. The physician said he'd survive, the blade had missed anything vital. But infection was always a risk, and he'd lost much blood. Justice Pemberton verified my identity through surviving loyal retainers and family records. Lady Emmeline de Montrose, he declared formally. Your father's estates are restored. Your title reinstated. The king himself has signed the decree. Everything I'd fought for. Everything I'd sacrificed 3 years to achieve. Adrian's eyes opened on the 3rd day. He looked at me sitting there, my hand near his but not touching. Why didn't you tell me everything? His voice was rough from disuse. I could have lied. Should have lied. But I was so tired of masks. I manipulated my own sale. Provoked my uncle until he'd sell me to Lord Reynard specifically. I needed inside this fortress, needed access to the evidence. I met his eyes. And I used you. Made myself into someone you'd trust, someone you'd help. Every conversation, every lesson, I planned it. The hurt on his face was worse than any blade. So it was all fake. Every word, every moment. I was just another piece on your board. At first, yes. But somewhere. Don't. His voice cracked. Don't tell me it became real. You care about me the way you care about any tool that served you well. I was useful, so you valued me. But you never saw me as a person. Just like my father. The comparison struck like a physical blow. That's not I do care. Can you honestly say you didn't calculate every interaction? That you didn't weigh whether keeping me close was strategically valuable? I opened my mouth. Closed it. The terrible truth was I couldn't. Revenge had consumed me so completely that even genuine feeling had been filtered through cold strategy. I'd won my war but lost the ability to connect without manipulation. I thought so. Adrian looked away. You saved me from my father. Gave me freedom and wealth from your restored estates. I'm grateful. But I won't stay here. Can't look at you without remembering I was just another tool. Adrian, please. What would you have me do, Emmy? Pretend I don't know how thoroughly you used me? Stay and play the loyal companion to someone who sees people as chess pieces. His voice gentled slightly. You won. You destroyed them. But you destroyed something in yourself too. He left a week later, wounds healed enough to ride. I watched from the tower as his horse disappeared down the road toward the capital, toward the king's service, toward a life that didn't include me. Something broke inside me that I'd thought was already destroyed. The last piece of the girl who could feel without calculation, who could connect without strategy. I'd won everything, and lost the only person who'd really seen me, in 3 years. Lady Emmeline de Montrose stood alone in her restored fortress, powerful and untouchable and utterly, completely alone. Revenge, I learned, tastes like ashes. And victory feels remarkably like defeat. Chapter 10. The Hollow Crown. The conspirators hung at dawn 3 weeks after the feast. I didn't attend. Didn't need to watch them die to know justice had been served. Now I stood in Chateau de Montrose's great hall, restored to its former glory. Tapestries depicting my family's history lined the walls. Servants, new ones, hired properly, moved quietly through their duties. Through the tall windows, I could see vast lands stretching to the horizon. All mine, all returned. Everything I'd planned for. Everything I'd sacrificed 3 years to achieve. So why did I feel so hollow? The servants feared me, the girl who'd orchestrated a conspiracy's downfall while playing victim. Local lords paid respect but kept their distance, uncertain how to treat a 14-year-old who'd proven more dangerous than men twice her age. I had power, wealth, position, and absolutely no one who knew me, really knew me. My lady. My steward's voice interrupted. The prisoner you requested. Marjorie entered in chains, flanked by guards. She looked smaller now, less formidable without her keys and authority. Her eyes met mine with defiance and fear in equal measure. Everyone expected execution. Marjorie had brutalized servants for years, myself included. Justice demanded payment. I studied her for a long moment, remembering every blow, every cruel word. Then, remove the chains. The guards hesitated. My lady, you'll serve my household, I told Marjorie. As a paid servant with fair wages and dignity. You'll answer to my head of house, follow the rules, treat others with respect. Fail, and you'll be dismissed. Not executed. Just dismissed. Marjorie stared. Why? Because I will not become like them. The words felt important, like a line drawn in stone. The monsters who killed my father, who brutalized anyone weaker, I won't be another version of that. Justice, yes. Vengeance, when necessary. But not cruelty, for its own sake. It was a small moment. One woman spared. But it mattered. After she left, I sat in my father's chair, massive oak carved with a family phoenix. I wore his signet ring openly now, no longer hidden in wall cracks. Through the window, I could see the road winding away from the chateau. The road Adrian had taken. My lady, a traveling merchant, was announced. He brings news from the capital. Adrian de Lysel has joined the king's service, the merchant reported, being trained as a knight. They say he shows great promise. A faint smile touched my lips. At least I'd saved one person, even if I'd lost him in the process. He was free, building a life away from his father's shadow. That had to count for something. My steward. I turned from the window. Bring me records of all tenant farms. I want to review rents, conditions, disputes. Everything. My lady. My father believed in just rule. In protecting those under his care, not just extracting from them. I straightened in the chair, feeling its weight. It's time I remembered what that means. As servants bustled to obey, I sat alone in the vast hall. Powerful. Isolated. Victorious and empty in equal measure. They say revenge is sweet. They're wrong. Revenge is ash and emptiness, a hollow victory that costs more than you realize until you've won. But justice, true justice that protects rather than just punishes, that might be something worth living for. I destroyed the monsters. Reclaimed my birthright. Now comes the harder work, rebuilding not just my family's legacy, but myself. Learning to be human again after 3 years of being a weapon. Learning whether someone who's made themselves into a calculating instrument of vengeance can ever truly connect again. Whether the girl who weaponized her own suffering can remember how to simply feel. I don't know if it's possible, but I have time now, and perhaps that's enough to start. The phoenix rises from ashes after all. Maybe I can too.